Shavua Tov, everybody. Shalom. This is the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Land and hosted by myself, Rolene Marks, where we bring you those top stories from Israel making headlines every Monday to Thursday. So if you don't get it in your mainstream media, you're going to get it right here. And just a reminder that you can check out our website at www.layoftheland.online. We are on Facebook. Our page is at Lottle's site. Please like us, follow us, share our content. We're on YouTube as well. Our channel is called, yep, you guessed it, The Israel Brief. And we would love it if you hit that big red subscribe button, like and share our content, and of course, interact with us on Twitter at Lay of the Land 5. So let's get into those top stories making headlines. And of course, the Ukraine is dominating the headlines. But something extraordinary happened over the weekend. News broke on a Saturday, just as the Sabbath broke, that our Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, had flown to Moscow to meet with Russian President Putin, taking with him Zev Elkin, one of our ministers in government of housing and construction, to translate. Now, this mission is being dubbed here in Israel as the life-saving mission, Pikuach HaNefesh. And basically, it roughly translates to the Prime Minister and Minister Elkin, who are Torah observant or observant Jews who broke the Sabbath as the religious laws allowed, providing it saves lives. And the philosophy around this from the Prime Minister is that we have to do absolutely everything in our power to try and save as many lives and try and play as much of a role as we can in mediating between Russia and Ukraine. The optics coming in are absolutely horrific, as is the death toll and the amount of refugees. Now, not too much is known about the meeting between the Prime Minister and President Putin. As you can imagine, it was probably of a very sensitive nature. But the Prime Minister said that he did find Putin to be quite rational, and they did speak about the situation with Ukraine as well as the Iranian nuke deal. And the Prime Minister, addressing his cabinet yesterday, said, we're not going to reveal more than that. As you can understand, the issue is sensitive. From there, the Prime Minister and Minister Elkind, after the 3-hour-long meeting, flew to Berlin to meet with German Chancellor Scholz and relayed the details of the meeting to him, as well as the members of the Biden administration and President Macron of France. Now, Prime Minister Bennett says that Israel has a moral obligation to do as much as possible to try and be a mediator in brokering some kind of peace between the two countries. He says, our experience as Israelis is we have endured many, many wars, and we know that once a war breaks out, it's very, very difficult to try and contain it. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid is off to meet his American counterpart, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, in Latvia, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. Now, many people have looked at Israel and wondered, why is Israel playing such a role? And the reason is simple, and I have been stressing it here on the Israel Brief. Israel enjoys good relations with both Ukraine and Russia. And we feel that even though we are firmly on the side of Ukraine and support the people of Ukraine, it is an imperative to keep diplomatic channels open. Also, Russia is an important partner for Israel in maintaining some kind of calm on our border with Syria. Russia controls the Syrian skies, and we know that a Freudian slip there, that Iran is enriching uranium and trying to encroach ever closer to Israel's borders. And so it is a matter of Israel's national security. Now, Israel has been criticized by some for not sending military aid aid to Ukraine. However, we are sending an extraordinary amount of humanitarian aid, and as we speak, another field hospital is being built, this time on the Ukrainian side of the border, which will be used to serve civilians and soldiers, and will be manned by at least 50 doctors and medical personnel from Sheba Hospital and others. This is in addition to the field hospitals that are being administered by Israel Aid and United Hatzalah in Moldova, including a safe tent for mothers and babies. Israel will also be sending 6 big generators to Lviv, to the hospitals there, to ensure that the hospitals do not run out of power. This is also in addition to the extraordinary efforts, and I must commend our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the diplomats that serve in Romania, Slovakia, Moldova and Poland, who are stationed on the border, helping not just Israeli citizens to evacuate, but citizens from Morocco, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, and even those that fall under Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. Israel also has 14 Jewish agency points along the border to help members of the Jewish community in Ukraine evacuate and get to safety. So far, Israel has taken in nearly 2,000 evacuees from the Ukraine here into Israel, including over 100 orphans that landed yesterday. And this is independent of the extraordinary Chabad, whose rabbis do not leave their congregations or the cities that they are stationed to, and organizations like the AJC, the World Jewish Congress, and many, many others. Also not forgetting WITO here in Israel, doing everything that we can to assist our Ukrainian and Russian students that are in our various projects. So an incredible effort being made. I mean, I'm here in the city of Modi'in, and we have collection points all over our city to collect much needed aid that will be distributed to needy evacuees. Now, a short while ago, Ukraine's ambassador to Israel, Ambassador Kornichuk, addressed the media. He said he thanks on behalf of President Zelensky, who incidentally Prime Minister Bennett has spoken to at least 3 times in a 24-hour period for Israel's efforts to mediate, and that he believes, as well as President Zelensky, that Jerusalem would be a good venue to mediate some kind of ceasefire. The ambassador also compared the situation with Ukraine and Russia to Israel's fight for survival in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, but also appealed to the Israeli government for military aid, putting on a bulletproof vest and a helmet saying, this is not military aid, please can you help and send that. Now, in other news, we are fast approaching the festivals of Ramadan and Passover, and this time of the year we do see an uptick in violence coming from the Palestinian side. Now, yesterday, according to renowned journalist Khaled Abu Toameh, Hamas have said that they will threaten intifada in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now, we are used to this kind of language coming from Hamas, but there are still various other flashpoints which could result in an uptick of violence. The flashpoint that is Sheikh Jarrah, the Israeli security presence at the Al-Aqsa and Muslim sites in Jerusalem to try and maintain the status quo, as well as clashes that have broken out in prisons all over Israel and between the IDF and various Palestinians in the West Bank. So Israel will be on a state of alert for any uptick in violence. Now, we've been covering Ben & Jerry's quite a lot lately, and last week we brought you the story that Iowa was the latest US state to enact its anti-BDS laws. Now, it was announced on Thursday that the Israeli manufacturer of Ben & Jerry's has launched a legal suit against Ben & Jerry's holding company Unilever on the basis that the company is allowing for Ben & Jerry's to discriminate with its decision not to sell its products in the disputed territories, and for the manufacturing agreement with Ben & Jerry's Israel to come to an end in 2022. He went on to say that for 35 years he has had good relations with Ben & Jerry's, but this decision by Ben & Jerry's and their holding company Unilever, who hasn't done anything to rein them in, breaks or contravenes Israel's anti-discrimination laws, which says you can't discriminate against any entity or person based on where they live. And our final story is one that is popping up all over social media. Is the situation in Ukraine equivalent to that of the Palestinians? Now, this is something which personally I find quite obscene. There are many in the pro-Palestinian camp that are lamenting the Western media and Western powers for focusing on the Ukrainians and not doing anything to deal with the Palestinians. Well, let us just remind those that are taking to social media and making these putrid allegations that Ukrainians have not fired thousands of rockets into Russian civilian territory, have not tunneled into Russia to kidnap Russian civilians, have not blown themselves up in restaurants and on buses, have not stabbed or shot at Russian civilians. In fact, Ukraine has been invaded by Russia entirely unprovoked, and that this kind of comparison is absolutely disingenuous, to say the least. And as the kids would say, read the room. So that brings us to the end of the Israel Brief today. Don't forget to check out all our social media that was mentioned at the beginning of this broadcast, and check in with us tomorrow for your latest headlines from Israel. I'm Rolene Marks. Thank you for watching the Israel Brief.